Hello and good welcome. That does not sound right. Wow. Welcome. You know, right? Like that's the worst.
That's my image series. Good welcome. Holy shit! Now it's fucking late.
Welcome to the Comics Experience Graphic Novel of the Month Club for the month of this is March. Thank you for helping me in the front. And our book this month is the fantastic Mr. Miracle, and everyone's supposed to applaud now. And we are joined here by Tom King and Mitch Gerads. Gerads.
It's Kindle.
Yeah. All right. And thank you, and thank you for coming out, and thank you for this book because this is a really good comic book. Do you know it's a really good comic book, or do you? No. I mean, I actually wonder if when you create something that's amazing, if you know it's amazing, or if it's like I'm just doing the best that I can. Does that make sense?
It does make sense because sometimes I'll read things where someone like loves one thing I did and hated another thing I did, and I was like, well, I wrote those in back-to-back weeks, so like, did I eat something different the second week? Right. Should I have adjusted why was I such a shitty writer on the second week, but the first week I was fucking nailing it? Yeah. I don't. Do you know? I don't. Yes, you do sometimes. Yeah. When you're working with this guy, you know you're doing well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
my mom says everything I do is amazing.
Well, your mom's right.
Yeah.
That's not what she told me.
Oh! All right.
Ends the King Gerads relationship.
Yeah, that was it. Breaking up live on a book club.
This is going to be the image documentary in 10 years.
Yeah. All right.
You've been voted off the team.
Yeah.
It's just going to be me and Clayton Cowles letter for the next project.
Yeah. I hope not, but
me and Clay Mann are going to go do our own thing.
No, you can't leave me alone.
So comics. Why comics? What it is about comics that's how you express yourself? And I'm going to ask you both, but I'm looking at you first, Tom.
It's two things. Number one, comics are the medium that most appealed to me throughout my life, just in terms of I was one of those kids who was like, not good at running or jumping or making friends.
Sure.
And for some reason, those kind of kids, superhero comics really appeal to. I don't know why that is.
I couldn't begin to figure it out.
Right? No, I'm sure Dr. Wortham had some theories. But,
Yep.
And so I just grew up with comics as sort of like my safety net, It's like where my brain went when it couldn't go anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just filled my life like that's like when I was a kid, I went to the comic store every chance I could get. I rode my bike there, rode my scooter there. Like I would think of the world in terms of money, like how much a comic book. Because my mother would not buy me a single issue, so it's like, if I paint the side of the house, I can get 7 comics out of it. That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like that was like my monetary system.
Sure.
So it's. In
was this like a 7-Eleven or a comic store or what?
I mean,
was this?
I'm old enough that I started out with like 7-Eleven,
Yeah.
so like independent bookstores when those were still things.
Yeah.
And they'd have like a little rack from.
Yeah.
And then I moved to a comic book store probably like when they like in the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Comics Inc. in Los Angeles.
Okay.
Yeah. It doesn't exist anymore. It got bought out, but that was my comic book store.
Yeah.
And so that's part of it. Is it just sort of second nature? And the second part is I started on novels. And I was terrible at writing descriptions.
Okay.
I'm horrible at it. Like I can't write how anything smells or tastes or touches. Like I'm okay with dialogue and action, but I just was never good. And so in comics, I get to skip that part and just throw that to the artist.
Sure.
So just in terms of like an easy medium to work in, that's quite wonderful.
Okay, but you still, I mean, you have to describe it to the artist in a way, right? You can't just like, it's Scott. He does this. No.
Yeah, but I never have to do like I mean.
Like I get the sense memory thing, right? Like it smells like this. Like that's a novelist skill, but
yeah, like Alan Moore can do that with comics, or Len Wein can do that with comics.
Yeah.
But I can't do. I'm not very good at that kind of language.
Okay.
It's just not my skill set.
Okay.
So I mean, the whole point of comics is to eliminate as many words as possible, and that let the pictures tell the story.
Sure.
It's a picture-forward medium.
Sure.
So that makes it easier for a writer. It's like a cheat almost.
Yeah. I think I'd push back on that a lot, that the words are critical to the... I mean, you're right, it's a picture-forward medium, but you also have to enhance the pictures, right?
Yes, that's true, but you don't have to...
You're not doing nothing, clearly, right?
No, I'm not...
Right?
Yeah, I occasionally contribute to the comics.
Sometimes I get scripts that are just the money symbol.
And occasionally it says suicide.
Yeah.
All right, well, so let me ask you,
Scott
Mitch.
commits suicide, and then like 3 pages of the money symbol.
Yeah. So, but why comics for you, Mitch? What is it about comics?
I mean, it's a tough question for me because I've literally been surrounded by comics my entire life. Like most people have that moment where they're like, oh, I saw this issue of this thing. But I have 2 older brothers who were huge comic book nerds, and I grew up, idolizing them because they were much older, so we didn't fight. There was comics before I could read in the house, and I remember I would sneak into my brother's room and read his Nexus comics before I could even read. But no, I mean, they always just fascinated me. I have a hard time tracing back, that moment when superheroes clicked for me, just because it's always been there. So I think it just kind of osmosis worked its way in. But it's such a... I like telling stories, and I like drawing, and what better way to do that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I wonder, because you specifically said superheroes, is the trigger for both of you the superhero, or is it the medium? And I ask this particularly because Sheriff of Babylon had, which is your first collaboration, was not a superhero comic in any way, shape, or form.
I think, as all things happen, I think, your tastes evolve. So I started out, like, superheroes. That's all I knew of comics.
Sure.
That's really all there was at that time. But then, tastes evolve, and you evolve, and you get older, and girls come into the equation.
Sure.
And, but then, now I'm all over the place. I love all of it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Did you study comics particularly?
So, I remember being in 11th or 12th grade, probably 11th, and I've been reading Wizard magazine forever.
I'm sorry.
And I remember reading that.
I've been doing this for 30 years. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So I had my subscription. You get your Wizard magazine, and they always had various features about art and drawing and the business and breaking in. And so I had the presence of mind to know that it was a very tough industry to break into. And I knew that I'd been watching Friends, so I wanted my Friends moment where I'm off on my own in my 20s with my own place, and Joey and Chandler come over. And so I knew I had to get out of the house to do that, and so I went to school for graphic design. And that's what I studied in college, and then I got a job after college doing graphic design, but they saw me doodling Batman on every notepad we had in the office, so they switched me over to illustration. That's kind of where it started.
And so was this at the point where, because now you can go to school for comics specifically, was that a thing then?
No,
or no,
not really. And I'll be honest, I don't recommend it.
Sure.
I think there's so much out there to educate yourself that informs comic work.
Sure.
But I don't know if studying comic work is the way to go. So I think a lot of what helped me, especially early in my career, is that I had this graphic design background, and so a lot of my peers didn't have that along with their drawing, and I think that helped out a lot.
Were you looking at film? Were you looking? What were your influences at that point?
I mean, comics still.
Yeah.
But then it was all print stuff. I mean, Chip Kid, was the easy idol at that point. That's what every single person in my graduating class, their big goal was to do book design.
Sure.
Everybody's. And when
that's like a job that 3 people get to hold, right?
Yeah. And only 2 of those 3 people make any money.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it I don't know, I'm rambling on. But,
no, you're not actually, because I'm really fascinated about this part of it. You go to school, you study a thing, but maybe you can't make money doing that thing, and then you want to do something that you love.
Yeah.
And I mean, sort of the steps, right? Like, there's a step there.
Exactly. So, like, I wanted to be a comic book artist, but I knew that it probably was... I had the presence of mind to know I wasn't ready. Mm-hmm. My whole thing is So Brian Hitch was like my idol somewhere in college. And I remember thinking to myself, like, until I'm as good as Brian Hitch, I'm not ready. Which is an insane thing to say. But, like, that was where my thing, I'm like, I realized flipping through Brian's, like, Ultimates that, like, oh, I don't know how to draw a bridge with 100 people on it. Therefore, I'm not ready. Because what if someone writes me a script that says you have to draw a bridge with 100 people on it?
Right.
Every script I write.
That's true. Only 9 times.
Yeah, only 9 times. Yeah.
But I don't know. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's go to the writing part of it. Did you study writing at any point? No.
No, I'm fairly self-taught. I mean, I went to college. I studied philosophy and history in college at Columbia, and when I decided to go, so I entered. This is my second career, so I went back to this in my 30s.
Sure. I'm really fascinated by your first career, by the way.
Yeah.
But go on.
So I was doing the CIA thing for a while.
Yeah.
And then I'd done comics first. I'd interned at Marvel and DC.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. I was an intern at Vertigo, and I was Chris Claremont's assistant when I was in college.
Wow.
Yeah, and
that must have been interesting.
Yeah, it was a great. Talk about a good way to learn comics, because Chris was the creative director of Marvel back then. It was at the end. It was right before Marvel Knights took over everything. So it was sort of the fall of Marvel at that time.
Yeah.
And Chris's job was to review every single script that came in and try to make it better, which meant just he was ignored by a lot of people. And but I was like his sounding board, so he would get a script in and be like, "This is why this sucks. This is why." Because Chris has some opinions, I'm sure he'd tell you.
He does, yes.
So just like over and over again, and at that point it was because there was like. There were like the old school guys, like Roger Stern, who was like total Marvel style, like their script would be a page and a half.
Sure.
And then there was the new school was finally just starting to come in, the Kevin Smiths and the Paul Jenkins, who were writing full like TV scripts. Yeah. So it was the whole gauntlet of what you would think.
Yeah.
I started there, and then I did the CIA thing. So then I wanted to go back and become a writer.
I did the CIA thing. All right, wait, hold on. I want to stick with the thread where we're at. So how did you become Chris Claremont's assistant in the first place? Like, where did that come from?
I started at DC, so I was an intern at DC.
Yeah.
And that's because I got a connection through my mom, classic privilege sort of way.
Okay.
And my mom was a Warner Brothers executive.
Okay.
So she knew Paul Levitz, who was like the head of, and so I went and interviewed with Paul Levitz, and I was like, oh my, because I was a huge Legion fan growing up.
Right. Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, you can work here. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to work on superhero. And they threw me to Vertigo, and I'd never read a Vertigo comic in my life. Okay. And I was like, I can't wait to photocopy these Preacher pages. I was like, there's a lot of farting in this comic. I was like, this man's face looks like an arse. Yes. And it's like, yeah, that's his ass face. So I was like, this is a whole arse, sorry. So I had that internship, and I was in I was going to school in New York, so I literally just applied to Marvel's intern program. Okay. And that's where they sent me up. So then that was the first time I got to work on superhero comics. Yeah. In Marvel, so that's how I became Chris Claremont's assistant. Okay.
So you were Chris Claremont's assistant, like not during, say, the Sovereign 7 time.
Right before Sovereign 7.
Okay.
He was Fantastic Four time.
Okay.
If you think it that way.
Yeah.
He was doing with
it was like the last gasp of Marvel as an independent entity, almost.
Yes, they were falling. You could see them falling. It's funny because my editor-in-chief now is Bob Harris. He was the editor-in-chief of Marvel back then. Yeah. And he was in a constant panic because everything was falling apart around him. Yeah. It was, and Jimmy and Joe were on this. They weren't on the same floor as everybody else. They were on the upper floor. Yeah. And everyone kind of could feel it coming because Marvel Knights was so much better than all the other comics. Right. And it was just kind of like we were waiting for them to take over. I felt.
Wow.
Like. Yeah.
This is fascinating that you were there during all this time, because those are kind of like major times for me as well, because the industry changed dramatically right then.
Yeah, no, and and the style of writing changed dramatically. Then. Yeah, it went from, maybe we were talking earlier about why comics. I mean, it went from comics being based on novels, basically. Comics were its first, like really up until like 2000, it was like a bunch of people who wanted to be novelists who couldn't succeed, but their basis was, their ideal was novels.
Sure.
And they wrote comics like novels, so there was like a lot of exposition in every panel, and there was a lot of time space between each panel.
Sure. And yet, the content was self-contained, right? Like each issue was self-contained.
That's right.
That was a rule then.
Yes.
Hard rule.
Every issue had to be someone's first comic.
Yep.
Especially for Chris. That was his mantra.
Yep.
That's why every single Chris Claremont comic starts with Wolverine being like, I'm the best at what I do, and what I do is, and he would just list them.
That's not very nice.
And Rogue would be like, yeah, if I heard you last, yes. I don't know.
Exactly. So I'm curious from your point of view this second right now, do you think that that's a good way to write, or a foolish way to write, or
the novelist approach? Or
that like every issue is the first issue?
No, I mean, I think the world's dramatically changed since then, and I also think that's like something people tell themselves, but it's not actually true. Like I think my first comic that I got it like sucked me in was Avengers 300, which is an Inferno crossover issue, and makes I love it. I have original art on my wall. It makes no sense as a single issue comic. The city's coming alive, and there are demons, and the Avengers have the Fantastic Four on the team, and there's a character named Gilgamesh. What the fuck is that? Even I talked to Walt Simonson who wrote the issue. He's like, yeah, I have no idea what I was. But I wasn't like, even as a kid reading that, I wasn't like, man, I can't understand what's going on. I was like, I want to understand what's going on.
Yeah.
Let me read the issue before and the issue before that, and let me read the issue the next.
Right.
And, like that was like comics were a mystery.
Sure.
And solving the mystery was going to the comic book store.
That was the magic of like when I was a kid. Like we didn't have a comic shop in our town, so you'd have spinner racks at the grocery store, the gas station, whatever, and you didn't know when anything would show up, and I don't know if I ever got 2 issues that were numbered back to back.
Sure.
But you were fine with it.
Yeah.
Like, you fill in the blanks. Yeah. You get Daredevil number 87, and you'd know what was... You'd figure it out.
Yeah. No, my first comic was a Justice League that wasn't like a 100-page giant or something, that had a Justice Society reprint in it, and I'm like, why the fuck are there 2 Green Lanterns and 2 Flashes? But I'm like, why the fuck are there 2 Green Lanterns? I need to know! How do I solve this question? Yeah. And so, all right, I don't mean just to stick with Tom on this, but I'm gonna get back to you, but I really want to know this. I really want to understand this whole CIA thing, and how you go from the CIA to writing comics.
Sure.
Yeah.
It was weird.
It seems weird. Yeah.
It was weird. How do I go? Well, I will say a lot of people in their career have had to say to their spouses, I want to quit my job and become a writer.
Right.
And this is not the easiest conversation to have with your spouse.
Sure.
It is much easier if you're like, I want to quit my job where people are shooting at me and become a writer. And then your spouse is like, well, okay. Like that, so I didn't go to graduate school or anything. I just went to the CIA right away. I was super young. I was 23, 22.
What led you there?
9/11.
Okay.
It was just.
So like signing up, I'm a patriot.
That kind of thing. Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah. So, and I'd done it for 6-7 years, and I had a kid. I had my first kid, and some people can do this. I couldn't. I couldn't sort of be the father I wanted to be and the CIA officer I wanted to be because I was I did counterterrorism, so I was overseas a lot.
Sure. And
I just didn't want to. I grew up with a dad. I just didn't want to raise my kid without his dad, kind of thing. Some people can do a balance. I just couldn't. And so then I started to figure out what I wanted to do, and I didn't have any skills. Like I was really good at making one terrorist spy on another terrorist.
Okay.
Which is like not the best pitch to like a marketing firm or something.
Sure.
And also, like, I couldn't even talk about it, so they could be like, "Oh, what did you do in your other job?" And be like, stuff." And they'd be like, "Oh yeah, come work for us." Yeah. So I always wanted to write. I always wanted to be a writer. I always wanted to write comic books. So I was like, I'm gonna try this, and I don't know. It seems fucking crazy that I did it, but so I took a year off. I did LWAP, like Leave Without Pay, it's called, and I wrote a novel at night because I was too afraid to call an artist. So I figured novels were the easiest way. I followed Brad Meltzer. Brad Meltzer had government jobs, and then he became a comic writer. I was like, how did he take? Oh, he wrote a novel in between. Okay, so I just literally followed whatever Brad Meltzer would do. And I took care of my kid during the day. I was a full-time house dad or Mr. Mom or whatever, and changed diapers. Then I worked at night between 12 and 3 every day and wrote a novel at night. And then that got published. Nobody bought it. It was a big old flop. But it got great reviews.
It was very good.
The 3 people that reviewed it, God bless them, and that was my now I had a calling card because it was published by Simon Schuster, so it was like it was a real book, yeah. And then they paid me enough money that we hired like daycare and stuff for our kids, so I had more time to write. And so then it became a matter of then the hustle begins, right?
Sure.
How can I turn this calling card into?
Sure. Well, that's the part I'm most interested in is the hustle. So how did you?
Hustle never ends.
No, I know it never ends. But how did you make that step from I've got a novel that no one's bought?
Yes.
And I don't mean that in the bad
way.
No, I mean that in
it was very true.
Sure. And so how do you then go to Vertigo? Right? At that point it was Vertigo, right?
Was Vertigo, yeah.
And you're like, well, so I wrote this novel and nobody bought it, but you should let me write a comic book. How does that work?
So my original artist on that was Cliff Chang. They gave me $10,000 and said hire an artist to draw pictures because my book was about superheroes. It was a superhero book and it had pictures in it. So they gave me a little money. I went to C2, E2 back in the day, and I went around Artist Alley and asked each people, and Cliff Chang had said yes. And then he got the Wonder Woman gig and said no, and Tom Fowler stepped in and did a fantastic job. But I think Cliff felt a little guilty because he had sort of gone all this way, and so. When the book got reviews, I went to him at San Diego Comic-Con. I waited in his line. I said, "Cliff, remember me?" And he's like, "What do you? Oh, your book. And what do you want to do next?" I was like, "I really want to write comics." And Cliff, which made my whole career, was like, "Well," he's like, "I'll send you the emails of all the editors I know, and you can drop my name just so you can show you're not a crazy person."
Yeah.
So I cold emailed maybe 30 editors, and this is the reason I was at DC Comics because Cliff was at DC, and he didn't have all the Marvel addresses.
Yeah.
And I got one response.
Okay.
And it was from Karen Berger.
Okay.
Who pharmacy run Vertigo and discovered like Neil Gaiman and
Yeah.
And she asked.
Made a comics for adults real.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, made comics for adults real.
Karen is the real shit.
Yeah, she's
I'm just saying. Yeah.
One of the great editors in history of comics, and still is. And she, I think probably it wasn't the book, but it was the CIA thing because I had that. That'd be my guess.
Right.
Probably the book, because Cliff used to work for her, and I used to be an intern there, so it was just enough to attract Karen to have a meeting with me. And she had a meeting. She met me at New York Comic Con, and I thought it was going to be a meet and greet, give me coffee or something. And she sat down at my booth where I was hand selling my novel. And which was horribly dirty, and I was super embarrassed. And she asked me to picture a series on the spot, and I had nothing. And I had to make up. And she's like, "You probably have a Vertigo series you've always wanted to write, right?" And I was like, "Oh,
of course I do."
Yeah, you don't say no to that question, right? Yeah. So like, yeah. Duh.
Yeah.
And I pitched her something, and it was one of those things where you can just see the pitch fall out of your mouth and just land on the table, and she's looking at it, and you're looking at it, and we're like, well, I guess that's fair.
Yeah.
And I honestly think out of sympathy, she was like, okay, well, I'm going to give you to one of my other, probably just to get out of the conversation.
Sure.
She's like, I'm going to give you to one of my junior editors, and we're doing an anthology. Maybe you can pitch for the anthology.
Yeah.
And she gave me to Mark Doyle, who's now currently the head of Vertigo.
Yep.
And and I pitched for an anthology, and I got a little story in, and that was the start of my career.
Neat.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing.
It was. Karen Berger discovered Alan Gaiman, Alan Moore, and poor little me.
And so like
Alan Gaiman, Neil Gaiman.
your experience with Chris did not actually help you doing comics necessarily.
It helped me learn to do comics. I mean, I ran into Chris years later. I was like, "Hey, Chris, I'm writing comics." He's like, "Who are you?"
Oh, that's great. I love that. Yeah, that's great. That's great.
That didn't help. Oh yeah. So.
And so, what you pitched to her was not Sheriff of Babylon, I'm assuming.
No, it was not Sheriff of Babylon.
Okay. So how did Sheriff of Babylon come along?
So they wanted. So after the little 8-pager was good. I did with Tom Fowler, who did the crap out of it.
Yep.
And they wanted me to start pitching series in. That was like the next step. And Scalped had just ended, and they said, we want you to do a crime series.
Okay.
And I pitched them a crime series, which they liked and got accepted. And it got past Karen and Shelley, who are the editors of Vertigo. And Dan DiDio said, who the hell is Tom King? And rejected it.
Wow. Okay.
And that's being turned into a TV show now, so you'll see that on TV. So and at that point they're like, okay, I'm sorry, this sort of fell apart. And I never wanted to write about the CIA or anything like that. But at that point, like the money from the novel had dried up. The little 8-page, I'd sort of, it was like I just didn't have any other avenues, and I knew like my kids needed money to eat. Yeah. So
eating is good.
I really didn't want to write about the wars because I just felt it kind of cannibalized the experience and it felt cheap. But then you're just like, you do what's necessary. Right?
Yes.
So I was like, okay, and I was like, you want a crime series? I was like, how about a crime series set during the time I was in Iraq? Because I knew that would interest them.
Sure.
That's a good pitch. And then they said, yes. Oh, that sounds great. And then they said, yes. And it got up to Dan DiDio, and he said, who the hell is Tom King? And rejected it again.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, and so that was Sheriff, and that's going to be a TV show too. So Dan is rejecting everything. No, it's not. Sheriff's not going to be a TV show. Who knows? But in the meantime, I got the Grayson gig. And that sort of took off, and then I got Vision, which was really Vision made my career. That was
made your career.
That was the big step. And then once I got Vision, some random editor at DC's like, why don't you do a Vertigo book? And I was like, you rejected 2 of them, and they're like, what? And then they're like, well, you can do it now. You realize? I was like, yeah. So that's why I always tell people like my first script for Sheriff was the first comic book script I ever wrote, but it was my 30th published.
Right.
It was originally a novel, right?
Yeah, I wrote it as it was a contained novel. I pitched it at the same time I pitched it to Vertigo. I pitched it to my literary agent, and they both said yes. And so I wrote the novel while Vertigo took its time. So it turned into a novel first, and I translated the novel into a comic.
Okay.
An unpublished novel. Yeah.
And how did you get involved in this, Mitch?
I don't remember. No. I was just wrapping up Punisher at Marvel. And all of a sudden I got a cold call from Jamie Rich, who's saying, oh, I'm the new, second guy at Vertigo. I'd love to pitch you something. And I was being super picky. I had turned down a few things from Marvel at that point, just because I wanted to do something that excited me. And Jamie pitched me like 3 or 4 different titles. And to this day, I think it was strategic, because I think the first 3... I thought the first 3 were so insane that they were made up. And then the last one was the military thriller, which is what I was known for at the time.
What were the first 3? Do you know?
One of them became a real book, so when that was out, I was like, "Oh, that's real." That was the Fireman one, yeah. And then I don't remember what the other 2 pitches were, but they just seemed crazy.
Yeah.
And so then all of a sudden, he lands on military thriller, which is what I was known for. Yeah. And I said, "Oh, Tom King's gonna write it," and I didn't know a lot about Tom King. I think I'd started reading Grayson at that point about this guy, but I knew I'm also friends with Tom Fowler, and I know he spoke very highly of Tom. It's like one of 2 people Tom ever speaks highly about. And I remember hanging up the phone after like saying yes, I'm interested, and he sent me like an email with some character designs to do and stuff. And I don't know if this story's true. I've heard you talk about it before, but I turned in a couple character designs. One was Chris from Sheriff, and then one was Sophia from Sheriff. And I drew Sophia. Part of the direction was Sophia drinking tea. Mm-hmm. And so apparently I was the only artist who came back with Sophia drinking from an Iraqi teacup and not an English teacup.
100%, yeah, we had a few people that drew that page, and you were the only, yeah. In Iraq, they don't have, or at least back when I was there, they don't have handles on their teacups. They drink them like that. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So he drew that, yeah.
Was that something you had researched?
Yeah.
Or yeah, okay.
That book, I like deep dove. Like, I don't even know if it'd be interesting to return to a book like that and see how I treat it, because that book, like, everything. I remember spent like an hour researching what kind of telephones they would have in Iraq at that moment in history. And after an hour of doing that, I realized it was the same phones they have everywhere else. There's a lot of that stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Oh, what would this car look like there? Like, same car here.
Were editors giving you positive feedback, or was that just, I care about the verisimilitude?
Yeah, I mean, it's a topic in a world that's near and dear to me, and it was also intimidating knowing Tom's background and knowing that, like, he had seen all these things that he's having me draw, so I had to, like, not draw them poorly, because he would know. So I was trying to impress Tom, I was trying to impress readers, trying to impress myself.
I was impressed.
Oh, good.
And when you see this work, is your instinct to go, here's what you need to do to change this part isn't right, or is it the bulk of it is good enough that I'm good with it? Does it make sense?
I can't remember you ever drawing anything where I was like, no, this is not right, as far as I can remember. Yeah, no, it was spot on. Mm-hmm. Every location there except one is complete. There's one location that's completely made up, but every other location is actually a real place, and he drew them spot on. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, I give them to my friends who were there, and they're like, that's it.
I had a few connections I use too. I have a friend who does a lot of nonfiction military books, Kevin Maurer, and he had a lot of connections of like photojournalists who were there at that time. So if there was anything I was like could not find on my image searches and stuff, sometimes I would reach out to Kevin and he would reach back from some guys and send me a whole bunch of photos.
But a significant part of your research is literally Google image search.
Yeah,
is that
you just get real good at like deep diving.
Yeah,
it's all about you. It's all about what you type into that search field, and sometimes it's not exactly the name of the thing you're looking for.
Can you give an example?
I don't know. See, the hardest part about that book is not only researching Iraq and the locations and all this stuff. You have to go one step further. So if I want to see what this building in Baghdad looked like, I have to research that, and then I have to realize what it looked like in 2014.
Sure.
And 2004.
Or 2004, yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was challenging because, like in the first issue, there's this the place where they eat, the
Baghdad Cafe.
Yeah, the Baghdad Cafe,
which got blown up.
So like every photo on the internet was the aftermath of when it exploded. There was very few, and that was some of the photojournalists came back, and so everyone knew of that. So yeah, you have to go that one step further to find the actual year and that era.
I remember seeing and like because you got the tissue boxes on the table. I remember that from being there. I was like, what an impression! And you got that perfect.
Thanks.
Is there a tension between you being there and him doing research for afar, or is it that you're just both trying to make the best thing that you can? I don't know if I don't think I asked that question correctly, but
I mean, I think that was it. I think we were both just setting out to tell the best version of that story we could.
Yeah, I don't remember ever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sweet. Sweet. I like that.
You nailed every. I don't know. Maybe I was good at describing. It must have been my description.
It was.
Definitely was. It must have been.
Is there any doubt for you, Mitch, of signing on for 12 issues of a crime thriller set in Iraq, which, like, realistically is probably not going to set the market on fire?
No,
right?
but
commercially.
It really came at a time when I had decided that, I'm the only guy doing realistic military in comics, and I felt like I was good at it, and I had connections, and I enjoyed it, and I was pretty dead set on I'm just gonna make this my career. I'm just gonna do this and be that guy, and so Sheriff was right there in there.
Yeah.
And only at the end of Sheriff, we were supposed to go right into Volume 2, and I remember writing Tom and Jamie and being like, "You guys, I've reached the apex of what I can do with this for now. I need something to break it up," and so that's when they brought me on Batman.
Well, I mean, it's being in Vertigo that makes that possible.
Yeah, exactly.
We weren't living and dying by our sales. We were on a page rate.
Yep.
And our sales were good. I think we were the top selling Vertigo book at the time.
Yep.
But that's not saying this.
Yeah.
You're not raking in royalties.
Exactly.
But you're getting your awesome DC page rate.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
I was definitely. I mean, to that point in my career, Sheriff was the most money I was making.
And so when you started on it, you were very focused on being able to do that military. But so in what way did you not want to do that? Is that a fair question? Just tired of drawing? It wasn't so much
that in reality. It was just that Sheriff it became a very deeply personal book for me. I got real invested in these characters. And it's so happily. Yeah, it's a rough book, and I think I was just kind of emotionally drained from telling that kind of story, and so I just needed something a bit more comic booky.
Sure, I dig that.
Yep.
I dig that.
And so then I did 2 issues of Batman and Catwoman making kissy faces.
Yeah. Did that clean the palette just fine?
It did. In fact, it did it too well, and then I was like, I want to draw more kissy faces. Screw this military thing.
Yeah. I dig that. Vision came along next, right?
Yeah.
Is that right, Tom?
Well, there's Omega Man came.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And Omega Man was the comic that did not sell, but was really critically acclaimed.
I think it sold less than Sheriff.
Yeah.
That was a zero seller.
Yeah. I think, wasn't there a point where it got canceled?
Yes.
At issue 3, but then everybody was like, "No, wait, this is really fucking good."
It was a huge moment in my career when the fans, because I became a rebel for a little while.
Yeah.
Because people love hating on DC's executives, and so it was like, whoa, Tom wrote something that they canceled and then it came back. Tom's a rebel. And then now they're like, oh, Tom's a company man. He's willing to kill Wally for them. Never mind. So I've gone the full circle.
Yeah. But I'm interested about that rebel portion.
Yeah, that was fun for a while.
Yeah.
It was my favorite story about what a low-selling book that was when they announced I was on Batman. We did on this live YouTube kind of thing.
Sure.
And we did a run through, and during the run through I was being goofy and I think I was making fun of, because Didio was interviewing me, our publisher, my boss, who I really like, and I was making fun of his comics, and he was making fun of my comics, and he screams at me, he's like, "That's it, Tom, taking off Batman and putting it on our lowest selling book." And I was like, Dan, I already write your lowest selling book. And I could see his face drain. He's like, what have I done? I put him on Batman? That's too big a leap. He'll never be able to pull off the marriage. Nobody bought Omega Men, but God bless the 6 people who did, and I loved it, and Barnaby began to do the crap out of it, so that helped too.
Yeah.
So Omega Men was that's when I sort of became a full-time writer, because once you have 2 books, you're kind of
sure. Because
I was reading half of Grayson with Tim Seeley, the great Tim Seeley. And so then I got Vision, and that was like when I took the lead.
So did Marvel try to poach you? Was that the idea, or was it?
Yeah, so Marvel reached out. Will Moss, an editor at Marvel, one of the best editors in the industry.
He really is. Yeah.
I put him and Jamie Rich, my current editor, as like the cream of the crop of editors. And Will reached out to me over Facebook or something, and was like, Tom, I'm loving Grayson. Your background is super interesting. I have the perfect book for you. And I was like, oh, it's going to be Winter Soldier. I was like, yeah, sidekick, spy, I get it.
Yep.
And I'm prepping all these Winter Soldier things, and they're like, it's Vision. And I was like, what? No. And then, like, you have to respond positively, but nobody has a positive feeling on Vision. Sure. Nobody has a negative feeling on Vision.
Right.
He's the most bland. Yeah. He's the middle of the road. Yeah, it's like to be like a Vision's in a comic. That's like a C+ comic. It's just like you passed. You might as well be happy you left. Yeah. So, but then you have to lie. So you're like, oh, Vision. He's my favorite character. And they're like, wow, I can't believe we're connecting on this. I was like, I can't believe I'm lying this much. So yeah, that's how Vision got discovered.
Okay.
Yeah. And then they're like,
so that's got to be weird, like trying to tell a story that you didn't pitch. Or am I wrong?
No, that's better. I like being put in a box. I like someone being like, you can only write, and these are it's much easier that way, rather than having an entirely blank page, the blank world. Be like, we want this and this and this, and then you kind of execute it that way. Yeah. I was thinking of Alan Moore with the Charlton's character.
Sure.
It's like, here's a box to put you in and see what you can do with it. So yeah, that was, and they told me, and like when you're working on a pitch with an editor, they're like, hey, pitch me something Vision, and you want to be like, well, especially when you're doing the hustle, like we said before, your goal is to make great art, right? No, that's bullshit. Your goal is to make great check to pay for your family, right?
Yeah.
So what you really want is more than you want to make great art is you want them to say yes to your pitch. So you're like, you want to be like, well, what do you want my pitch to be?
Right.
I will pitch that, but you can't tell them that because then they think you're an idiot. So you have to kind of subtly be like, oh, hey, you have any parameters you're looking for, or is there a genre you're thinking about? You ask them these vague questions, trying to guess what's in their head. And they said, we want Vision to be science fiction. I was like, awesome, science fiction. I'll do Doctor Who Vision. And he's going traveling through. But basically, I was thinking like what Dan Slott did with Silver Surfer. And he was probably already doing with Silver Surfer, so it's totally unoriginal. And then they're like, yeah, sci-fi, but not in space. And I was like, what the fuck is sci-fi, but not in space? Right. And yeah, so those were my parameters, and I was like, sci-fi, but not in space. Oh, like Frankenstein's. I was like, oh yeah, Frankenstein's wife. So Vision builds a wife, and I was like, oh shit, that's just Frankenstein's wife. Bride of Frankenstein, which is a great movie, right? And then I was like, well, what if he builds a wife and children? And then I was like, oh, that's really fucked up. And when you get to that point, you're like, that's when a pitch gets good. When, that's really fucked up.
Right.
That's the key to a great pitch. Like Mr. Miracle. Like, what if he kills himself? Oh, that's really fucked up. Oh, okay, yeah, that's good. Okay. Or Omega Men. I was like, what if the Omega Men are Al Qaeda terrorists? That's really fucked up. Okay, we'll do that. So that's. What if Catwoman leaves Batman to the altar? Oh, that's really fucked up. So that's how you get.
So the conflict is in that's a bad idea.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
You want to find something that sort of challenges you, where you're like, man, that you could never pull that off.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. You only ever did the one book at Marvel, right?
I only did the one book at Marvel. Yeah. Vision.
Is that why? Why is that?
I grew up a Marvel zombie. Those are my comics.
Yeah,
I love Marvel. I grew up a big, huge Avengers fan, and the X-Men, and New Mutants, and X Factor, all that stuff. I signed an exclusive to DC super early on in my career, and I stuck with it. Yeah.
Okay. And why did you sign an exclusive? Just other than I want to provide for my family. I wanted to provide
nothing
for my
more
family.
than
Okay,
that.
good.
I mean,
I just wondering.
No, I mean, I mean, I'll just be perfectly honest. I mean, I don't live to write. I write to live.
Mm-hmm,
like, the most important thing in my life are my 3 kids and my wife and my dog, and they'll always come first. And so that's always the primary decision maker, is how I can give a happy life to sort of to the people who have given me a happy life.
Yeah. You're in a rare place that you're able to do that from writing comic books.
Yes, and boy,
yeah, I don't mean that in a bad way, right? But that's hella true, right?
It's a struggle, yeah.
Yeah. How did you land Batman?
Oh, was it
the crown jewel?
I don't know. Jason Aaron signed his Marvel exclusive, I think.
Okay.
How did I land Batman? So Vision was a big success, both in sales and it was very critical when Eisner's and stuff. And they moved me, and they were going to do this new. The DC had sort of failed with what do they call it? DCYOU. That had not gone off well.
It was a flop.
It was a flop.
Serious. No one wanted that.
So nobody wanted that. And Omega Man was at the bottom of the pile, right? So, and so they're like, we're restarting again, and we're going to do double ship of all the books. Mm-hmm. And Scott didn't want to do double. I mean, I'm sure he'll tell you, he didn't want to do double ship. That was just sort of not something he wanted to do. And they had offered me as part of that deal to do Detective. Which was sort of stepping up from, and it made sense. Like, I'd written a successful book, and I'd written Grayson in the Bat Family. Yep. And so, like, the next step was a detective. I think that would probably be my next step. And
James Tynion was writing. It wasn't he? No.
There was like a rotating, like Greg Horowitz was on it, and so a lot of different people were writing on Detective. James ended up writing it. For Rebirth, yeah. So, and I don't know what the final decision was, but at some point, basically Scott backed out and said, "Okay, I just don't want to." He wanted to focus on. He had written the story he'd wanted to write with Batman.
Right.
He told it with him and Greg were this perfect Batman team.
They were the perfect Batman team. Yeah.
And he's like, "What I want to do now is I want to write." I want to choose beautiful artists who can take their time and write these sort of singular Batman stories. Mm-hmm. And that became All-Star Batman. Mm-hmm. And so there was sort of no one to write the main Batman book. And I think it was just musical chairs, and I was the last person there. I think at that point.
I remember you calling me and being like, "Oh, Marvel's trying to court me, and DC's courting me. Oh, and they said if I sign their exclusive, like, I can do Batman." I'm like, what?
Yeah, it was a weird time. It was super weird. Yeah, it was super.
But I mean, as a freelancer, right, in your head, aren't you like, Batman's the best-selling book in the marketplace? I have to do that. There's no other option, or is that wrong thinking on my part?
Yeah, no, I mean, the difference. I mean, Marvel was offering me excellent books. I mean, the best thing that can happen to you in your career is to have. There's only 2 companies to have them fight over you. Is nice. But I mean, the thing was, Vision had gone so well. It was so much fun to write. Mm-hmm. It was so well edited. Gabriel was so brilliant at the art, and Jordy was good on colors, and Clayton. Mm-hmm. I was like, this is just perfect comics. I loved it. It's like it's. And so I was like, how can I do more of this?
Right.
And Marvel's like, well, you want to do more of this? We're the people who fucking did it with you. Let's do more of it.
Right.
And so that was very tempting to sort of go down that road.
Sure, but was it at Marvel, so now you do Hawkeye? Or you know what I mean? Like, was it like you're the C character guy who makes them good? Or did they offer you the crown jewels?
Yeah, no, they didn't offer me crown jewels that time. But they offered me some decent books and some decent projects. I mean, nothing on the level of Batman. Mm-hmm. There is nothing sort of on the level of Batman.
In a way, yeah.
In a way, yeah, right. And also, Batman comes with its own its own tricks, right?
Sure.
I mean, there are comic book stores that will close if Batman doesn't sell enough that week. So you have to write in a certain way. You have to write within a certain style, and you have to appeal to a certain audience.
Sure.
And when I first came to it, I was like, that means you can't ever be yourself. It took me a while to realize how I could be myself within those parameters. And it was also working with a superstar artist, David Finch, and I'd never worked with a superstar artist before, and I was kind of intimidated by it. I pitched Mitch for Batman.
You did? Dan said, no way.
Dan said, no. Who's Mitch Gerads? And he popped it back down.
I remember giving Batman an M16.
So Batman was definitely, there was a large intimidation factor there. In terms of, and also I love Marvel Comics. I love that world.
Sure.
So
when you're pitched doing Batman with someone like Finch, who clearly can't do bi-weekly comics, right? Like,
yes.
I mean, that's not like he's bad or anything, but there's just no way that guy can draw bi-weekly comics. So which
is terribly depressing because I've done 67 bi-weekly issues, and I think Finch did the most in a row.
He did
the first 5.
Yeah. So is this hard for you as a writer, right? Because it seems to me like a lot of comics writing becomes who is your partner,
100%.
Right?
All comics writing becomes that.
Yeah.
That's the key to everything.
Yeah, and so how does that work for you when you know that you have this weight that's on you, right? That you literally become the face of the company in a way. Or maybe you're not aware of that. I don't know. Are you aware of that?
The poor bald face of the company.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think I've ever become. I think Scott's still at the company, and now Bendis is there, and Jeff's there.
Sure, but if you're writing the main book, though, you don't feel. I mean, it's great if you don't feel that. I don't know what it's like to be you. That's why I'm asking.
No, I never feel. I still feel like I'm a little on the outside. I feel like I'm of that sort of quattro of people. I feel like I'm still at the young member.
Wow, that fascinates me. Because you're the one who's consistently every month is the guy.
Oh, don't say that. I've always felt that Batman is Scott. Scott and Batman are inextricably linked.
Sure.
In a way that I'm not inextricably linked with the character. As much as I love him and as much as I write him.
Are you not writing more issues consistently at this point than he has, though?
I know, but...
Right, he got to 62 and you're at 65 or 66?
Well, he got to 51. So
okay,
way
right, so there you go. That's my point, though. That's my point. Scott did the Batman Who Laughs, which kicked my ass in sales last week. So don't. Sure. So he's still bringing it. That's not what I'm trying to say.
No. I've never felt that sort of that I'm the face of the whatever. No, I don't think of myself that way.
Okay, all right. I have to ask you one more question before we go to this book, because I want to ask you about the wedding and
I remember it.
And no, I know, and so
many people hate it. Oh my god.
No, it's not actually that. It's the. Did you? So obviously you knew that it wasn't going to happen.
Yes, from day one. It was always planned.
Sure.
Yeah.
But when DC promoted it as it was real.
Yeah.
What was your reaction to that? Like, and I don't want you to tell tales out of school or anything like that, but I just, because a lot of my peers went really, really in financially on this, and we're kind of catastrophically fucked as a result. and I mean that in the best possible way.
Bald face of the company.
Yeah. So is there? I mean, do you feel that there's a responsibility as a creator to what the company does as marketing? That's actually what my question is.
Man, it's hard, man, because marketing is a science that I don't understand.
That's something we don't really get too much of a say in.
Yeah, it's something we don't get too much of a say in, and I'm a deadline writer. I have a deadline every Friday, and I can't miss it. Right now, I have 6 artists depending on me. If I miss a deadline, one of those artists doesn't get a paycheck.
Right.
So my focus is always to make the best book I can, and if I spend my time worrying, I mean, for us, like I probably can affect marketing a little bit, but it would take me yelling at people, and screaming at people and threatening to leave the company.
Sure.
It's not like I can just make a phone call and it would happen that way. Like it's fits.
Sure.
And I don't have my focus 100% is like right.
Yeah.
So I do remember specifically being like, this is calling DC and being like, this is a will they, won't they? This isn't a they are.
Right.
Like, that's how I want this marketed.
Sure.
And they're like, don't worry, Tom, we got this. They so did not get it.
They did not get it. I mean, it was really pitched to the market as the thing of the century.
And to me, I was a bit ignorant because, of course, I was like, this is the middle issue of a 100-issue run.
Sure.
And I had put in all what I thought were such obvious clues that this wedding was going to fall apart.
Sure.
I had written this whole arc about Booster Gold where I showed sort of what happens with Batman leaving, and I had written these 2 Joker issues where at the end Catwoman's like laughing hysterically because she's had some sort of revelation that the Joker's doing. So to me, I was like, I'm scared people are going to be so obvious that they're not going to get married.
Right.
Yeah, I mean that was the great lesson, to be more involved in marketing, but I'm still not.
Well, it's tough too because sometimes, most of the time, like, you know, the heavy push for marketing for, say, issue 50, Tom's already writing issue 60.
Sure.
Like his mind's already past it.
Sure.
And so we're worrying about those issues while the fans are worrying about 5 issues behind us. Sometimes it's hard. It's hard to get back in to that mode.
Yeah. And it was. I mean, it was the best-selling DC issue of the year.
Yep.
It was just behind Spider-Man to be the best-selling comic book of the year. Spider-Man had even more covers than we did, and we did. And there was returns allowed on it, and the return figures were less than 1%.
Sure.
So it wasn't like a total.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the only thing I'll say is the people who did the custom covers were not necessarily allowed to return 100% of their covers, right? You know, so I'm not blaming you by any means. Yeah. I'm just very curious about that sort of ineffable part of the process of, you know, you as creators expressing something and then how they market it is different than what you want, you know? And I find that kind of infinitely fascinating as a person who has to put down money and buy comics to do the thing.
Yeah, I don't know.
I have no blame for you.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's literally somebody else's job.
Yeah, like, sure, absolutely.
We're hired to do our thing for a company, and they're hired to do another thing for a company.
Sure.
And we literally don't work for the company. We're freelance writers.
Yeah. Yep.
But I don't know. I feel responsible for it.
No, I mean, I don't think you should. It was fairly clear that you were doing the right thing. You know. Especially, I very much appreciate that this was the middle point of your 100-issue run, and so 100-issue 1, was that explicitly stated up front? Was that a thing that you wanted to do, or was that how it evolved?
Well, I mean, anything will be yanked from you if it's not a success.
Sure.
So
sure.
It helped that Batman was succeeding in selling. But yeah, my contract in the original was for 3 years, and 3 years at Double Ship was about 100 issues.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, so from the beginning, I thought of it as sort of a 100-issue arc, and it was this tale of it's. I mean, they asked me what are the 2 things that have to be the run? And it's Batman loves Catwoman, and Bane is bad. Right. And that's what it's about.
Right. Does 100 issues scare you or intimidate you as a creator?
No, I don't. No, it's just,
okay.
It's you always. I mean, if you I feel like shitty comics happen when people are like, I can't, man, when they get to issue 76, that's when it's going to be amazing, you know? This issue doesn't have to be that good. Like, I just always focus on, okay, this next issue has to be as good as I can make it. It has to have a beginning and a middle and an end. It has to, someone's given me 20 comic book pages, and I have to make this as good as possible. So I just always focus on whatever's ahead of me, whatever's in my script that week. Yeah.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Makes sense to me. So let's shift to this, because this is why we're here. Where did this come from? What's the genesis?
So it goes back to what we were talking about. Mitch and I were supposed to do what became War of Jokes and Riddles. We were going to do, after you asked to work on a Batman book because you had fun writing those issues.
Yeah, and then we pitched it as like a out of continuity kind of our long Halloween, and they loved it and they greenlit it, and that's.
So you came for a while. You came to them with Mr. Miracle.
No, then it went south.
Yeah. So then Tom gets a phone call one day, and they're like, "Oh, we reviewed your story for War of Jokes and Riddles again. This sounds awesome. Let's make it in the main book."
Right.
Like, oh, cool. But then, like, you can't fire McKell, you can't fire David. So Mitch is out. And then I think Dan DiDio and Tom had a little talk or a moment, and Dan's like, "Well, we want you and Mitch to do a thing. What do you guys want to do? We'll do it." And then, like Tom said, he likes working in a box, so he just asked Dan, like, throw some characters at me. Became Atomic Knights.
And Mr. Miracle.
Miracle, yeah.
God, Atomic Knights. Jesus.
I know, I was very tempted by Atomic Knights.
Yeah, all right.
Oh, man.
I'd have to buy a dog.
That's the book I want to do with Tom Fowler, man. He would
So they pitched Miracle to you the same way they pitched Vision to you.
Well,
the different days, but yes.
Character,
yeah. But that's what Dan wanted. He's like, "I want you to do Vision at DC." I was like, "Oh, great! That's the book." A Vision seems like one of those like lightning strikes kind of book. I was like, "Yeah, that's just let's do it next year again," So he pitched Mr. Miracle to me, and so that's how we got to Mr. Miracle.
Okay, and your affection for those characters was.
I mean, I'd read all the Kirby stuff, and I'd grown up on the JLI stuff. And, but I wouldn't say it was super deep. I mean, I loved your affection was probably more deeper than mine. I was like, oh, it was almost like a Vision thing. I was like, oh yeah, Mr. Earl, he's my favorite character. I mean, I loved his power. That's what I was like. He's a super escape artist. That's cool.
Yeah. No, I grew up, again, with those brothers who were super into comics, and one of my earliest memories was my brother Greg handing me Mr. Miracle. I think it was the Marshall Rogers issues. And from there, then I went to Kirby, and just loved the character, loved him, and I loved Barda, and it felt different than other stuff I was reading, and they felt like a really cool, they felt more human than a lot of the characters at that time that I was reading. And I remember just really imprinted on me. And I remember Tom, I think it was through Twitter DMs, was telling me all about War Jokes and Riddles being canned, and I was bummed. I was like, that was going to be my Batman book. And Tom's like, well, Dan said we can have the keys to the kingdom, just pick something else. And I was like, besides Batman, I really don't have. I mean, Mr. Miracle, and he's like, what?
I try to fight because it must exist if I can go back far enough.
Yeah,
that conversation must.
Got to be way back there. But yeah, all of a sudden he was just like, yeah, that's what I'm here to pitch you, and he pitched me his idea for it, and I was like, holy shit, yeah, I am in. So
nice.
Best possible outcome from everything.
Did you have an affection for the Kirby Fourth World stuff generally, or
no? It was Mr. Miracle himself.
Yeah.
It was definitely the Mr. Miracle book. I probably had read the New God stuff probably after reading the Kirby Miracle. I was probably interested in read back, but I was never a the New Gods were my thing, was specifically.
Yeah. I always thought the New Gods was really a weak idea, but Miracle himself was really fucking cool.
All those books are so weird.
They are. They're like, fucking strange.
The last half of Mr. Miracle is almost like a horror book.
Yep.
And it's weird. And it's awesome.
Yep. I still have vivid memories of seeing that cover of OMAC. Might be issue 1. I'm not quite sure if it's issue 1, where it's the woman in the box with her legs sticking out.
Oh yeah.
You know, and that always creeped me the fuck out as a child. I was like 6 years old when I encountered that. I was like, that's the weirdest goddamn image I've ever seen in my life.
I grew up terrified of Darkseid.
Yeah.
And the reason I was terrified of him is, especially now when I see photos, I don't know why I was so terrified. But Burger King had those little figures that held the cups.
Yeah.
And I remember I had the Darkseid one, and it scared me. I would drink from it.
Yeah.
If
we have the Batman one up there in the it's there on it's holding our pens is the Batman.
If my mom set down the Darkseid one, I needed the Superman one near me.
Yeah. Yeah. Freaky. Wow. All right. I have many more questions, but maybe let's turn to you people and see if you have any questions. You're here as well. And anybody who's watching on the live stream, if you have a question, please ask it, and they'll bring it to me. If there's actually anybody watching on the live stream, I don't know because I can't see. But who in the room? Does anybody have a question they would like to ask? No? Yes, in the front row.
Tom, you said that you don't live to write, you write to live.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of us probably here feel that you guys are at some sort of superstar level in this medium, in this industry. I wonder if there would ever be a point at which maybe either of you separate or together would do some sort of creator-owned stuff. Whether that's an image type book or if it's something in the Vertigo wheelhouse, but if that thought ever runs in your respective heads.
Yeah.
Since you are company men and all that stuff.
I'm sure at some point we'll end up there. We'll come up with that idea.
The idea, yeah. What about like a whole saga, but it's like in space.
Yeah. Or like there's a bunch of dead people walking around. Yeah.
We'll talk afterwards. I think we just made some money.
Oh my god.
Right now I have some ideas in my head. I'd like to do some like super artsy fartsy like Fantagraphics per second kind of books. Eventually, that's sort of an ambition to do something like that. But right now, at least for the next 2 years, my focus is on making Batman as good as it can be, and the Project Mitch and Eric good as it could be. And then, of course, there's like this gold rush on in Hollywood right now. I mean, you guys are I'm in the home of the 49ers, right? Like, it's like that is happening again, but like a bunch of miles south of here. With Netflix invading the entertainment industry. So I'm also trying to sort of take advantage of that situation while it lasts.
Sure.
Yeah.
Is there any opportunity to pitch Mr. Miracle for DC Universe, which is a new streaming service that they have? Or?
Oh yeah, there's all sorts of those kind of things, yeah. So they're working on every single angle they can get so that everyone has their own, eventually every single writer will have their own TV show and it'll be aimed at one single person. It'll be a 1-to-1 ratio between writers
Yeah.
and we'll just make a TV show for that person. They'll be like, it's pretty good, Tom, thanks, I'll make another one tomorrow.
That's funny. I saw in the back, there in the middle. Yeah.
Thanks for coming, guys. Love your work.
Thank you.
Specific thing. In Mr. Miracle and Sheriff of Babylon, at the beginning of the books, you have this awesome way of jumping right into the action. In this way that kind of draws you into the story, that gets it going, but there's not a ton of the description going in until things start to go. How do you storyboard to get to a place so that you can jump into the story right away and then like fill in the rest of the bits later?
I know for me, like anytime I read any book, especially if it's a book that has like its own world building and all that stuff, if you've got to explain a whole bunch of stuff to me at the start, that's a bad book. Like, if I have to read 2 pages of you telling me about the world, like, give me 3 pages of showing the world, and you can pick it up. Like, the best instance I can think of that is the Spider-Verse movie. Like, it's crazy. It's something comics have been trying to tell readers for decades, like explain multiverses and all this, like you can have 2 this and blah blah. And that movie just does it like that. And everybody in that theater, no matter if they're a lifelong comic fan or my grandma, who's dead, that's weird, but
You take your dead grandma to the movies?
so you?
Dude, we have our Fantagraphics pitch.
Like, you just understood it, like, immediately. And I think that's kind of what Tom and I try to do with our books, is there's rules to these worlds, whether they're already established from Jack or DC or us, but, like, you know, you just lay it out as plainly without overworking the reader as much as possible.
Well, I mean, there's huge disadvantages to telling artsy fartsy books through superheroes, right? Like, the disadvantages are you don't own your own stuff. You have to work in this incredibly unrealistic world. You have to deal with continuity. Like, those are the downsides. But the upside is these characters have a history with the fan base, and you can skip a lot of the exposition. And so if you're going to have the sacrifice of hitting those bads, you might as well take advantage of the goods. So you don't have to go, like, if this was a book called, like, Monsieur Amazing that we were doing at Image, you know, and we'd have to sort of explain, you know, which superhero we were actually copying semi-legally. Like, the fact that we were in with Mr. Miracle, people already knew in the beginning that Bard and Mr. Miracle were in love. I didn't be like, what a great romance. Like, it just came with it.
Yeah.
So that helps you jump right into the story. That's why I love doing these little books like Vision and Mr. Miracle and Omega Man, because you can skip a lot of the preamble.
I mean, I can see that, especially with Omega Man and Vision, because they're kind of in their own corners in a way. But the New Gods, it strikes me that DC has always been trying to exploit these characters, and I mean exploit in the right way.
Yeah.
Right? And so there's a lot of accretion on the myth that you do or do not have to pay attention to as a creator.
Oh no, you have to pay attention to it. That's what makes it good, is that you build upon the myth, right?
Right.
That's how you set up the stakes for the whole thing.
I mean, Mr. Miracle was our love letter to Kirby. It was our love letter to comics. Like, we all the Kirby stuff was, you know, the beginnings of our story Bible.
But the New Gods, in a more broad sense, have been Source Wall, and it's like now part of the mainstream DC universe, and there's all this other stories that are happening with these characters. Was that a challenge to you, or do you just like, I don't care, we're just going to go with Scott and Barta?
I mean, from the very beginning, we knew that this is a story that either took place inside Scott's head, or is in an alternate universe, or is in a brand new universe, or is, I mean, all the questions of what's going on, or is in continuity, is out of continuity. We sort of knew that in the beginning, and so in that way we could sort of put off the pressures from the outside to sort of affect us, and use what we could, and it was almost like I don't say a trick, but the fact that but I kept saying it was in continuity, because the fact that it was in continuity, the fact that he's broken from continuity is a part of the story of the book, right? That's all. The resolution of the book is what it has to deal with.
Sure.
Yeah. So we always sort of knew that. But all that stuff, that's how you increase stakes in your book, because it affects the general universe, and so you take the good with the bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Vision isn't told in continuity, you know, like, and Omega Man is in continuity, sort of.
Well, as much of continuity as Omega Man has.
Yeah, that's but the greatest, the thing about DC that makes where it excels over almost any other comic company, is that people have come along and done these things where they sort of took a piece of DC and took it aside for 12 issues and turned it into some sort of artsy-fartsy thing, something, you know, where they did New Frontier, they did All-Star Superman.
Sure.
They did Dark Knight Returns, they did Watchmen.
Sure.
So there's a history of this, and we were arrogant enough not to say we could do that, but to say we want to try to do it. And so that's what we followed those models. We followed the Alan Moore, Grant Morrison, Frank Miller.
Yeah, I don't think that's arrogant at all. I think that's what makes comics great. I don't know.
I mean, those are my favorite comics, so that's easy to.
Yeah, exactly. In the front, yes.
There's a recurring line in Mr. Miracle where it kept saying "Dark Side is."
Yeah.
And the fact that it was a never a finished sentence throughout to the ending kind of leaves it open for the readers to have their own interpretation. But I want to know, what's the intent when you were writing it, or like while you were doing the layouts? What's the Dark Side is what?
Well, I think it's not that the sentence is unfinished. It's that is the entire sentence. Dark Side is. He just is.
Yeah, Dark Side. It's, you know, evil. This comes. I mean, I've told this story before, so I apologize if people have heard it. But when I was first dealing with this book, in the very beginning, I talked to a guy named Julian Lytle, who's a webcomic guy in DC and probably the smartest person in comics. And Julian said, "What are you working on next?" I said, "I'm working on this Mr. Miracle," and I kind of had this idea. He's like, "Mr. Miracle, oh my God, you have Darkseid. That's the greatest weapon in the DC universe." I was like, "Darkseid is kind of like a rip-off Thanos." Now I know that's historically inaccurate, but you know, I grew up as a Marvel zombie, and Thanos was so cool. And Thanos had this great love affair with death, and the greatest stories in the Marvel universe were written with Thanos. And I was like, Darkseid's kind of like he felt like Thanos light to me. And he's like, no, man, because Darkseid is. I was like, what does Darkseid is mean? Which it was kind of a vague phrase that Grant had used on some posters in the background of a cover, and a page turn. And he's like, dude, Darkseid is. It's like when you have two choices and you know you should make the right choice and do the right thing, and you make the other choice still. Darkseid is. And I was like, whoa, what? And he's like, it's that feeling when you wake up in the middle of the night and you just know you're not going to make it to the morning. Darkseid is. And I'm like, oh my God. And it's like,
I like the one you said earlier about how like you say something to your wife, and you know if you say this, you're going to sleep on the couch. And you know if you say this, you'll be fine. And you still say this. Darkseid is.
And we have been, and for Sheriff opens up, the first issue opens up with a child getting shot, which is horrible, but I didn't want to show that shot, because I just didn't want to show a child getting shot. So Brian K. Vaughan had used these black bars to do in Y. He'd use these black bars to do like date and time stamps, and so I stole that idea for Sheriff, and I said instead of when the moment when the bullet hits this, we went to a black panel and just said bang, and it was literally because I just didn't want to show a child get shot, and so when Julian was saying these things, I just saw it in my head. I was like, well, instead of doing that blank panel, we said bang. I'll do a blank panel where we just said Darkseid is, and it'll be like at those moments when Scott is and it becomes a metaphor for Scott's depression. It becomes a metaphor for the evil in the world. It becomes a metaphor for, and then of course this is 2016 when the election's happening, and it just sort of felt like evil was sort of seeping in to sort of every part of our society a little bit. And so I was like, man, Darkseid is, and yeah, so that's how it came about.
I remember having, it wasn't a fight, but it was a little back and forth with our editor at the time about, we had all sorts of problems in Sheriff of getting the letter to understand that, like, it's not supposed to be bang! It's supposed to be very understated and, like, let that moment, and so, like, constantly fighting our letter, trying to get them to shrink it. And I remember when we started doing Mr. Miracle, the original lettering pass had this very New Godsian font. And I was like, no, let's just use the same font from Sheriff. And like they let us do it, which I was surprised about.
Well, it worked, I guess.
Yeah.
Now it's on mugs and T-shirts. And tattooed on poor people's bodies.
Yeah, is that weird? Is that weird? That seems weird.
I think it's awesome. The only one, we were just talking about this before, is I remember at New York, this past New York Comic Con, they had like a tattoo booth set up somewhere on the show floor, and you could pick from like 5 or 6 different designs, and one of them was Darkseid Is. And so like 4 or 5 people throughout the convention would come down and be like, oh, check it out. Like, it's awesome. And it looked exactly like the comic. One day I was on Twitter, and Tom and I got a tweet from someone. And they're like, oh, check out my Darkseid Is tattoo. And it was janky. It was it was like a prison tat with like a big pen. And you could tell this kid was like probably in high school, and you're just like, oh, right. I'm so sorry. Awesome. Yeah. Cool.
Dude, that
that's crazy.
Darkseid is on multiple levels.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's a long answer to the question.
Yeah, that was perfect. Yeah.
Was there another in the back? You okay?
So going back to Marvel as an intern, what was that like? Were people like, oh, look at the intern, he thinks he's a hotshot now? Like, people receptive? Did they even know who you were?
No, nobody remembered that I was an intern. Tim Seeley, who I was on Grayson, was an intern at the exact same time, and I don't know if we ran into each other in the hallways. So we were sort of the returning Marvel interns from 1999. Yeah, no, everybody had been fired between when I had gone.
Chris Claremont's still around.
Yeah, but he's not in the building. Yeah, he was an executive then. I don't think anybody. I mean, the 2 people like Bobby Chase. These are editors, but Bobby Chase is now at DC Comics, and so is Bob Harris is now at DC Comics. So the people who were there are now across the street or across the country, as it is. Nobody remembers that I was there. It's very sad, but I remember. Mostly from all the comics I stole.
I'm curious when Nick Darrington got involved in Mr. Miracle.
Oh. Yeah, so I remember I obviously wanted to do all the covers, but like when you, especially at that time, when you do a regular cover, you have to send it in for solicitations. You have to do it way ahead of time, and I'm already doing 22 pages of 9 panels each. And at some point, I remember Jamie was like, would you mind doing variant covers? And then Nick could do those? Because variant covers at that time, they've changed it now. But at that time, you didn't have to actually turn your variant cover in until the book was going to print. So I was like, I'll do that. And there's a couple times we did that.
I wanted Sienkiewicz. That's who I wanted.
Yeah.
I wanted Sienkiewicz on.
That was a miscommunication that will probably haunt me, though I'm really happy with my Mr. Miracle covers. But I remember Jamie writing me and being like, would you like Sienkiewicz to ink you? And I thought he meant on the whole book. And I was like, no. Like I couldn't do that. Because I do pencils, inks, and colors, and I feel like if I give up any part of that, A, I'm going to be much slower, and B, it just won't be me. But like for covers, it could have been really cool. But I didn't know that's what he meant.
I wanted something dark and creepy and weird. And then they picked Darrington. I was like, I don't know, because on his because I just knew from Doom Patrol, and his Doom Patrol is fairly, I know cartoony is a bad word, but it's on the side of it's more cartoonish. Yeah. And then I saw the famous cover he did, which the Robot Man helmet cover. Yeah. And that's when I knew, okay, this guy can do what he wants.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's so good.
Yeah, that cover on, is it 10? The one that's the negative.
Yeah.
Negative.
Wow, man, that one is just the best Darkseid I've ever seen.
That's my favorite cover he did.
He's like an actual artist.
Yeah.
Bendis slacker off.
No. I agree. Bendis just posted, I think Nick had a birthday and Bendis was at his house and he's like, check this out, and he posts all these photos. Like, Nick has rows of sketchbooks. Yeah. Like, just one after another like this, like 50 of them, and each one is these beautiful, elaborate illustrations, all with pencil. And
He wears all black. He's got cool
he's
hair.
got cool long hair.
He works with the rock star on the other book.
Exactly.
So he's much stupid Nick.
But I will say, the first time I ever met him was at NC Comic Con, North Carolina, and he'd been doing, I think, animation stuff prior to coming back to comics, and he showed up and he texted me. He was like, "Can I hang out with you?" And he's all just kind of, and then now he's Dick Darrington.
I love it. Let's talk about craft a little, maybe. How do you write
Macaroni and cheese?
scripts? Are you not that craft, the other craft? Are you writing full scripts? Are you writing synopsis? What's your process?
Dollar signs.
Yeah. I mean, if you actually want to know, my scripts are in Vision. Has all my scripts are Vision. If you get the Vision hardcover, I do full scripts. They're modeled a little bit after the way Mark Waid does them, a little bit after the way Jeff Johns does them, and a little bit after the way Brian Azzarello does them. I get to those three people. And my scripts are full but sparse, is what I would like to say. So I say, I mean, Mr. Miracle is easy because every panel is laid out the same way, so that makes it a lot easier. But yeah, I label each panel, what's in each panel, and how many panels are on each page. But it's I famously sometimes post, like I'll do for Mikkel, I'll do panel 1, Batman fights ninjas, panel 2, Batman punches ninja in the stupid face, panel 3, Batman wins. I mean, it's like
There's a lot of punches in stupid face, kicks in stupid face, slaps stupid face.
And then I put the full dialogue in. Mm-hmm. So like a lot of people in comics will do. We were talking about today. It's like I think the average script, just in terms of my colleagues reading their scripts, is like 75% DC and then 25% Marvel stuff.
Okay.
Where it's my scripts are fairly strict compared to that.
Yeah.
Like I don't do, hey, I was thinking maybe if we do something here, it could be like this, or maybe you could do something like that, and then I'll add the dialogue later. Like I don't do that. I do panel 1, close on Batman. Panel 2, ninja flying through air. Panel 3, but it's as simple as that. Close on Batman. That can be whatever the artist wants to do.
Is there dialogue in there at that
point?
point?
The dialogue. Okay. Yeah, with the dialogue. Yeah, I have to write that. I have to because the dialogue dictates the. I have one superpower. Or I have two. I have the recruiting the Sarah's thing. But my other thing, the other thing I'm really good at, and I think it comes from 30 years of comics, is I can see if they tell me the artist in advance. I can write a script and see what the artist is going to draw. I don't know why I can do that. It's like my most useful talent in life. But I can. I don't know. When I read my scripts, I was like, okay, Lee Weeks would draw it like this. Mikkel Yanin would draw it like that. Mitch would draw it like this. David Finch would draw it like this. And like 98% of the time, I'm correct. So what I do is
you can literally visualize the artist's style when you're writing the script.
Yeah.
That's a pretty amazing talent.
Yeah, I don't know.
But like you do it in a way where like you don't like, oh, I know how he's going to draw this, so I'm going to lead him there. He just, Batman enters room.
Yeah, and I know what bare minimum I need to work with. I guess Jorge's kind of new, but right now I'm working with 7 artists currently. If you count Lee, who's sort of taking a break. But all of them I've been working with for over 2 years, I think. And yeah, so that's the one. So I picture the comic I want in my head. I picture it. I say, okay, what comic do I want to read? And then I describe that comic. And I put in the minimum amount of description I know the illustrator will need to hit that minimum.
And when you receive this script, is he right or is he full of shit?
No, yeah, totally.
Okay, great. Yeah. And then so how do you approach breaking it down? I mean, there's enough description there that obviously with something like Miracle where you're on that 9-panel grid, like you're really locked in a lot of ways to what the page is going to look like.
Yeah, I mean to a point. Like Tom said, a lot of his script would be like on Barda.
Yeah, I mean, it's simple as that. That's why I can't think of anything else.
Yeah.
Like on Barda.
But no, I think it sounds cliche or whatever, but like Tom and I just kind of get each other. Like he writes the kind of books I want to draw.
Sure.
I think I draw the kind of books he wants to write.
Sure.
Yeah, no, I get a Tom script, and it's kind of the reverse. I see exactly what I want, and I see exactly what he's aiming for.
Yeah.
And we don't even really do a ton of back and forth when, like, we're making an issue, just because I think we both understand.
Like I say, I work with 6 artists. None of them I do layouts or do what are they called? Thumbnails. Yeah. When I first started in the industry, when I was like, a lot of people work this way, where the writer writes a script and then the artist sends a thumbnail and says, "What do you think of my layouts?" I don't do that. I skip that stuff.
Yeah, no, we never really. We did a little at the start of
beginning of Sheriff or something. Yeah,
because Shelley wanted them, and then I think as soon as Shelley left, then Jamie was like, "Yeah, you don't need to send those in."
Are you, Tom? Are you thumbnailing for yourself though? At any point, even that you're not sharing it with the artist, that you just so you get how the beats on the page work, or is it just all in your head?
Only if I'm doing some complicated math thing.
Okay.
Like, Omega Man had an intense. I did the layouts on Omega Man because it was every issue was reflective. So like the layout of the first 10 pages reflected the layout. So page 9 reflected page 11. Yeah. And so forth, and then the issue, because if you look at an Omega shape, it's a reflective image, right? It's the same down the way. And then the first 6 issues mirror the second 6. So issue, so issue 1 reflects issue 12. Issue 2 reflects issue 11. So for that, I had to do a lot of math. So that was a lot of me drawing stupid squares on things. But no, generally I don't. I wrote an issue once that was backwards and was really complicated to do. And so when I do a thing that requires like that kind of stuff, but generally no, I just go to the typewriter and write.
Do you
typewriter?
I knew what you meant. Is the 9-panel grid restrictive or empowering, or just because of the rhythm of the bump, 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 bump on every page?
I think. I get asked that question a lot, because I think on the surface level, you'd be like, well, you don't get any artistic freedom. But I think in the reality of it, I was able to have more artistic freedom because there's the magical stuff about the 9-panel grid is that you know exactly how to read it.
Right.
Your brain processes it immediately. With any other comic where it's, different size panels or breaking out of panels, even if it's super easy to read, there's a part of your brain that has to figure it out, even if it's not a strong part of your brain. But so with the 9-panel grid, I get to not deal with that. I know exactly how the reader's going to read it, which means I can now control the time in which the reader sees stuff passing. Whereas if you are all over the place in a layout, you don't really know how much time is happening from this panel to this person breaking out here. It just looks really cool, and you can follow the action. But so on the 9-panel grid, you get to move the reader at your own pace, and you get to stop the reader cold with the Dark Side Is panel, or remind them to be a little uneasy when they see some shaky, VHS work on those panels. And there's something too, like when I work in that 9-panel grid, and like I don't know if you guys noticed in Batman 62, it's like a 3-panel grid, so it's just 3. There's something magical. So you get it.
Good explanation.
Yeah, you get it.
No, but the timing's different. I mean,
but the magic there is that it's like a TV screen. When you watch a movie, your TV doesn't start changing shape depending on what the cinematographer wants to show you. It stays the same. So it's like a new skill set where you just learn about like moving the camera and picking your shot and stuff, rather than. I'm so interested in storytelling versus just making a comic book. And I want to keep the reader in the story as much as possible. And I think anytime you break out of the panel or you change things around too much, there's a subtle psychological thing that's reminding the reader they're just reading a comic book.
Sure.
and I want to do everything I can to just keep them in the world.
Sure. I find that the difference between a 9-panel and other layouts is sometimes the difference between 4/4 time and 7/8 time, let's say, where, because I always describe it to music, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's that syncopation is different, and so the way you react to it is different. I'm not describing it in any way like a rational thing, but
so in Mr. Miracle, I can do 9 panels of Scott's face, slowly changing, realizing something. Whereas, imagine that same page, but now it's bigger panel here and a smaller panel here. It just doesn't work.
Is the 9-panel ever a challenge for you in terms of I have to fill the whole page? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it totally does. I guess sometimes, and I think especially as the book went on, I got more used to what I was trying to do storytelling wise, and so there's other like craft side working the 9-panel grid that's great. Of if I'm controlling time and I'm just moving a person's facial features, like I don't have to redraw the background every time.
Sure.
I can just drop it in there.
Sure.
So sometimes that would save time. You'd be surprised going through that book, the simplest pages that have like the least amount of changing from what often took the longest because I was so focused on the acting and the facial cues.
Sure.
And especially because if you're doing it through 9 panels, sometimes the changes have to be very subtle.
Sure. Well, because so often the camera is kind of locked in that middle frame.
Yeah.
Right? It's not close-ups, it's not pullbacks, it's middle frame.
Yep.
That's kind of a hard way to tell a story.
And I think of it like a cinematographer too, where if there's a scene in Mr. Miracle where he's holding Jacob and he's singing to him and it's 9 panels, and like you don't want to like do a different expression every time, because can you imagine watching that movie of like constantly.
Yeah.
So it's very subtle, like, Jake's hand will move a little bit one panel. Yeah.
And probably my script was he's sitting on the couch singing was the description of every single panel.
Yeah.
There was no.
What Tom would do a lot would be like Scott singing was panel 1, and then like panel 2 through 9 would just be like singing.
Like literally that?
Yeah.
In the script. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. And then he'd literally put the dialogue of what he's saying.
He's putting the repetition in, and you're enforcing it through the grid.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Because I knew he would do what he does, which is what he just said he'd do.
Yeah. And are you also picturing that in that same sort of middle shot perspective? Or...
I feel like when you put the dialogue in that tells the artist what to focus on, kind of. Yeah, if I'm picturing, if I put like Scott sitting on couch with, or like panel 1, Scott sitting on couch holding baby, singing to baby. Yeah, that's a middle shot, right? As opposed to if I wanted just a close up on Scott's face, close on Scott's face.
Yeah, you would write close on Scott.
Yeah, or if I wanted super pulled back, I'd say camera pulled back, you can see the whole room.
Yeah.
But if I just so I can see the based on the description where he's going to put the camera.
So is there a difference for you in writing the beats of a 9 versus when you're writing Batman, and sometimes it's a 3 or sometimes it's a 4, and it changes from page to page?
For sure.
Can you talk a little bit about the mechanics of that, maybe?
Well, 9 is the easiest.
Is it easy?
Oh,
okay.
Yeah. Mr. Miracle was super easy to write because I know exactly how a 9-panel. I mean, it sounds arrogant, but I feel like I know how that works. Like I know what each. It's like you become Frank Sinatra. You know the beat of the song. You know how to come in behind the beat. You know how to come in behind it. And you know what the effect of every sort of. Like I always know 5 is the most important one. That's going to be the one people take away from. 7's the least important one. There's when you're on 4, you've established a new pattern. So if you have the 3, 4, all these like little things, like I know each little trick that I can use with each one.
But like no one talks about this is the thing that I find fascinating, actually, because I agree with you as a reader and I see it as a reader, but no one ever talks about these things out loud.
Like if you want to do like Alan Moore did the famous like the sign was flashing, so it changed colors every one.
Yeah.
So you do it every other one, so you can do that. But then if you do every other one, and then you want to do a double break, like you want to do on 5 and 6, so comics. I mean, everything in storytelling is you establish a pattern, then you break it. You get the reader comfortable in something, and then you break it, and make them uncomfortable. Man, Batman and Catwoman really love each other. Oh shit! And then the reader's so uncomfortable. They're like, "Why the fuck don't they love each other?" And then you bring them back to it's like jazz, right? Jazz, you play. There's a standard tune, and then you go away from the standard, and you're like, "Why the fuck are you going away from the standard? That's kind of cool, but I love that standard." And then you come back to like, "Oh, it feels so good when you come back." So it's all about tension and release, and release. That's all storytelling is, right? Yeah. So that's what you can do. When you have a 9-panel grid, you can establish those patterns so easily.
And you're conscious of this when you're writing?
Yeah.
Like conscious, like not just that you know that that's happening in the back of your hand, but like in the front of your brain.
I mean, it's like driving a car, right? When you're driving a car, you don't think about like when you're driving a car, you're like, wow, did I just make a right turn? How did I know how to do that? But if you're actually thinking about I know my hand is doing this, and you never want to get the what those things in tennis, you get the quips or the ids or
the yips.
The yips, where you think about it too much.
Yeah.
So you don't wanna, so it becomes like driving a car, where if you think about it, you know what you're doing, but if you're doing it just well, you just do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the unique parts about when we do books is I know I get really wrapped up in the mechanics and the thoughts and the philosophies of storytelling and what I want to do and blah, blah, blah. I know Tom does the same with the writing, and I'm not trying to say anyone doesn't do that, but I think there's a lot of talent in the industry and they do it very well, where they're just like, I really want to make this cool shot of Batman doing this thing. I think Tom and I get weird about it.
Yeah, we're weird. We're weird people. We're still the rebels, damn it.
Yeah.
And so how you write for different people, I'm sort of trying to figure out the rhythm of writing for a Batman versus writing for Mr. Miracle, right? Because this is a very beat specific comic book. It doesn't vary. I mean, and where it does vary, it's using the page as the 9, which has got to be very different than when you're writing for 3 panels stacked.
Well, with Batman, I've had 10 artists on Batman or something like that, maybe more. And for each artist, you have to find the rhythm that best suits them.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I do it right every time. Well, I've had more than 10 because Nightmares is a different issue, different each time. And you also take in mind like your responsibility is to get this artist. Again, he draws to live. He doesn't live to draw. So you have to make his life a little as easy as you can, so that the best results. Like if I'm doing for Tony, I love Tony's work, and Tony makes extra income on selling his art. I'm not going to ever do an issue for Tony where there isn't a beautiful Batman splash.
Right.
He can sell.
Sell.
Like that's. If I don't do that, I've literally robbed Tony of thousands of dollars.
Yep.
And I was like, why would I ask a guy to work so hard for me and then take thousands of dollars away from him?
Yeah. So
working with a guy like Mikkel, who's all digital, that's not a concern. You don't think about he has to sell the art. But Mikkel, you think, oh man, Mikkel is the master of dropping panels and having people move over space and having multiple images of things. He's been that way since Grayson. And he loves to do that over so giving Mikkel a double page splash with a person moving over it. He knows how to do that, and he does it super well. And because he's digital, it makes it a little easier for him, because his backgrounds, he can build his background through his digital stuff.
He was an architect before comic.
He uses this architecture stuff. Or you work with a guy but Clay, who I think may be the most talented artist I work with, besides Mitch, of course.
No, I agree.
Clay is like a savant, like a genius artist, Clay Mann. And I feel like I just insulted Tony and Mikkel. They're also geniuses.
No, they're no one's gonna take it the wrong way, man.
Clay's like a wild card. Like you never know what he's gonna do. You just know he's gonna do it beautifully.
Yeah.
And so he'll like explode stuff off the page, and he'll do these, because Clay he cares so much about the art. He never does a page half-assed. He doesn't understand. He gets so mad at when he like everyone's favorite issue of Batman of mine is issue 38, where they go on the double date. And literally, I've thousands of people that's my favorite issue. That's the best issue. Clay called me after he did that. He's like, "You're gonna want to fire me from Comix. I hate every single panel I wrote in here. I didn't meet your expectations. I'm sorry." And like so like when you're working with Clay, you have to keep that in mind, and the fact that he can do this wild stuff, and you have to make sure there's room for him to do that and not lose his mind. So you work. It's almost like that's like a psychological game, and these guys are your friends too. So it's like playing basketball with your friends. Kind of.
Sure.
You work with each of them to find the right rhythm.
So the structure of this is better, harder, easier. I don't.
Oh no, this is easier. Yeah, no,
this is easy. Yeah, just a 9 bump. Is it easier for you as an artist?
Yeah, I mean, there's
sweet only 9 panel grids from now on.
I mean, are there points where you're like,
done?
"Fuck, I don't want to do 9 for this"?
No, I never got there.
Okay,
because I knew the larger book needed to be that.
Yeah.
There's just a practical thing where like it takes a long fucking time to draw 9 panels for 22 pages a month. So that, like
there's
especially towards the
it,
end
yeah.
Towards the end of Mr. Miracle I was pretty burnt out.
Are you 85%
of that was the new
kid. Well, there's
kid.
2,500 panels in Mr. Miracle.
Yeah.
2,000.
Don't say that out loud. You'll scare people. Are you?
And it's $25, so it's 1 penny panel.
A penny a panel. I love that. I was going to ask a question that was something about. I don't remember what the question was now.
But no, it's because a 9 panel grid is so easy to work. When you're working a full script, like every page, you have to make a decision how many panels are on this page, and that decision affects your next page. Because I don't want to give Mikkel a page that's all 8 panels because that would kill him.
Sure.
So I have to if I decide on page 2 I want to do 8 panels, I know by page 4 I'm going to need a full page splash.
Right.
And you're telling a story, but that has to that dictates how you tell the story, and that you have to give the artist what you have to make able to make the deadlines, or else you just get shitty art.
Yeah. So Mitch, you get a script with 9 panels a page. How long does it take you to lay it out to the final step?
I think I averaged 6 weeks an issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And then we had a planned couple break months, and then towards the end, it's funny. Every book starts off with X amount of lead time. You never know it's going to be this much or if it's going to be this much. But like no matter. So one of the reasons books change artists so often is because no matter what, by the time you get to like half of that 12 issues, your deadlines they just shrink every time. Just by the nature of...
How many artists there can do a book in 4 weeks? I don't think I've ever worked with one.
Michael Walsh.
Michael Walsh, yeah. No, I did a vision issue with Michael Walsh. He didn't do it in 4 weeks.
But so no matter what,
as good as he is,
you're always going to get closer and closer, and the solution for that is you just switch out the artist.
Yeah.
Well, we weren't going to do that, so it just gets tighter and tighter. So by the end, dealing with the new kid and the deadline and stuff, I was pretty burnt out.
Yeah.
But like so proud of the book. Like that was there was points there where like I went and got an EKG. I mean, I thought I was having stress-related everything.
Wow.
And
just 8 panels, Tom, and I'd survive it. 9 panels.
Like the thing that like got me through it all is that I was so proud of the book and I was enjoying it. So yes, it's a ton of work and you're losing sleep and all the stuff that goes personal life, all that stuff. But like at the end of the day, when I sit down, I was never like, at no point in this book was I really going, fuck that. I was like excited to be doing it.
Did you know what you had on your hands? Did you know that this was going to be a book like at issue 3?
God, no.
That we're going to win Eisners. That,
we were dead set that nobody was going to read this thing.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. I mean, that changed obviously at some point. Probably around like 5 or 6, but no. And then like there's a special thing where the book got really personal, where Jacob was born, and I had just had my child, and everything in the book was paralleling exactly what I was going through.
Yeah.
I mean, Jacob in the book is my son with black hair. Because my kid has like jet blonde hair, and it would be weird if we had the two
Jet blonde?
Jet blonde. It'd be weird if we had the two jet black hair.
Like Jet Blonde as a writer, you're onto it.
That'll be our second book.
Oh yeah, Jet Blonde.
Jet blonde. So yeah, it became this really kind of cool thing where I got to like have this time capsule of having my own child in a book.
How do you work pencil and ink?
Digital.
Digital.
All digital.
All
Yep.
digital.
And you color yourself.
Yep.
Okay.
But I have two Mitch originals on my wall,
Do you?
so I at least have that.
What was the second one?
The pirate
Oh yeah.
when we killed
The
Alan
page
Moore.
that never happened.
Yeah, we didn't do that.
Yeah.
Is there a reason you work digital versus physical?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of reasons. It's funny, like, how I first decided to was comic artists work all the frickin' time. And so I would be sitting there in my little studio area, and I'd be drawing all day, and my wife would come home from work, we would say hi, blah, blah, but then she would go watch TV, and I would go back to my studio, and, you know, if I was on a deadline, she would go to bed, and I would continue working. We barely saw each other. And at some point, I remember hearing about or reading about or someone talking about that you could have those digital tablets that are like the computer's built in. It's not something you attach to your existing computer. And so I researched those, and I was like, oh, I can get one of those and sit there and work next to my wife on the couch, and we can spend all night together. And so that's why I bought it. And I was traditional for still like a year after I owned it, because I didn't want to do it for actual work until I was super comfortable with it, and before it stopped looking digital. That was always my biggest worry, is that I didn't want to do anything that looked digital.
Sure.
Even if I was doing it digital. And the brushes have evolved and stuff to the point where now I'm very comfortable doing it that way. But then, I also found I was faster. I was experimenting more. I was happier because I was able to evolve quicker. When I was traditional, if I wanted to try something, I wouldn't, because if it doesn't work, I'm just going to have to redraw this page.
Sure.
Now with it, traditional, you can put things on digital, you can put things on layers and make a line. You don't like that line, just Control Z until you get the right line. And
does it cut your income that you don't then have the page to sell as an artifact?
It does. I mean, a lot of my peers sell their stuff for
that was what I was asking.
Thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
I will say that
I gave you my original Mr. Miracle pages.
True. I own 9 pages of original Tom King art from issue 10. But, it does, but I think as I got older, I think even before I had my son, I really started to realize that, like, time was way more important to me than money. So the time I was saving, and I was less stressed, and all these things, they added up to where, like, I would rather be this than have a few more $1,000s in my bank account.
Sure. Makes sense to me. Yeah. Makes sense to me. Seth.
Sure. I have a question about what you were saying regarding storytelling and subverting expectations and jazz and rhythm and everything. When you're approaching characters like Mr. Miracle or Vision or Batman, and you're going in with the idea of subverting expectations, with some of them, especially like Batman, there's 80 years of stories. Which expectations how do you choose which ones to subvert? Or is it more of of what you're doing in the story itself?
Well, I think Batman's an interesting case, but I think what makes comic books special, especially superhero comic books, is like they're super ridiculous, right? Like it's super ridiculous that a man dresses as a bat and punches people instead of just like, curing cancer with his $1 billion, right?
Yes.
Thanks for ruining that, man.
Issue 99.
Yeah, issue 99. So, but then okay, that's the first thing. But what makes comics good is when you take the ridiculous seriously, it becomes, it starts to connect with people on a deep level. So like you're like, that is so fucking ridiculous that Batman has billions of dollars and chooses to go out at night and punch people. That's stupid. All right, well, let's take that realistically. What the fuck could possibly motivate a man to not to do that, right? And then suddenly you're like, whoa. Then it becomes, and then the ridiculous becomes a metaphor for us. Like, why don't each of us give away half of our money? Why do we pursue the goals we pursue, right? And then, so you take the cliche seriously, and by taking it seriously, you start to undermine the cliche itself, and it becomes something beautiful. You know, it becomes a metaphor. It becomes. It becomes part of sort of what connects us to stories and connects us together. I don't know, I'm getting fucking bland and boring. I'm getting into my own cliches, but yeah. So that, I feel like that's how you subvert it. You subvert it by taking it seriously, and. I do this famous thing or not famous, but I do this thing over and over again where Batman and Catwoman are constantly, because Batman and Catwoman have two origins, right? They met on the boat in Batman number 1 in 1941 or 40, and they met on the street in Frank Miller's retelling in year 1, and both of those origins are continuity, and so it makes no sense. So it's ridiculous. So let's take this seriously. Each one of them has a different memory of how they met, and then that becomes and to me that reminds me of like my wife and I can't agree on where our first date was. We can't for the life of us agree on it. Like I think it was this burrito place and she thinks it was this Ethiopian place, and we go back and forth, and it becomes, and the fact that we don't agree on that becomes the story of our lives, right? And so so when I look back on, when I look back on my life, like it's like from God's point of view, it has a continuity, right? If someone just ran my life as a movie, it would go from A to B to C to D, and then I would die. But in my own memory, the continuity makes no sense at all, right? Like my memories are mixed up, and my own life looks like I had 17 different writers writing it. It looks like at one point Bob Kane was copying fucking someone else, and they wrote my high school years. And then Frank Miller came in and wrote some CIA shit, and then Grant Morrison decided to do some writer shit. Like it feels like my life has had these different writers, and so when you take shit seriously, it becomes like a connection to reality. Oh, sorry, that's going in circles, but that's the trick. Don't tell people. Oh, that's what Tom does. Just takes the cliches seriously. Puts it on a 9-panel grid.
Do you think of like, so you like with Batman, for example, there's only a certain number of cliches that work in the character.
Oh, Batman has so many cliches.
The stories are varied, but ultimately it's like, you've got his thing with Catwoman, you've got his thing with the Joker, and whatever the various, villains are. And do you have them sort of like laid out, like with Catwoman, Batman winds up doing A, B, and C, and so I'm going to flip that, this one or that one, or like how do you think about processing the story that way?
Or do you?
Yeah.
Well, I always think about the single issue matters first. I don't think about this overall arc. Like that's the focus is always on the single issue, and getting. It takes. And my comics read fast because I have few words. So you're reading my comic, you're getting a 10-minute experience. I want that 10-minute experience to be fucking awesome, and I want you to be able to go online and complain about it for at least 5 hours. Like that's like that's the money, right? Like you're not paying the $4 for 10 minutes. You're paying the $4 for the conversation with your friends.
Even I would say like that's one of my favorite parts about working with you and getting scripts from you is that every issue feels like it has its own hook. It has its own theme. It has its own feeling rather than just like... I've never gotten a Tom King issue of something in a script and been like, oh, this is just part 2 of whatever. Everything feels like it has a special
But like
reason.
Catwoman's a great example because that's what I'm working on. That's what my brain is there right now. Like the cliche in Catwoman is they're on again, off again, right? Like they're Ross and Rachel, right?
Yes, but
Or Ross and Rachel or Catwoman.
yeah, sure,
Batman.
yeah.
And so if
So what you're saying is they're on a break?
and so if we take that seriously, like what does it mean that you constantly in a relationship with someone who falls in and out of love with you? What does that mean to your psyche, and what does that do to you? Like then it becomes something interesting, you know. Like if we're like, that's a fun cliche, but what does it mean? What does it mean for those characters that they can't be together and yet they can't be apart? Then it's like, whoa, what the fuck's wrong with these two people? And then it's like, whoa, what the fuck is wrong with us, you know?
A lot, probably.
A
lot, probably. We're almost at 2 hours, so we should probably start winding this
You
down.
must be so bored.
No, I'm actually loving this. I wanted to ask a question originally about connecting Mr. Miracle and the Vision in terms of they seem like they're both about characters willing things into life that are outside of their own existence.
I see to me, I see the Vision, Sheriff, and Omega Men as three same, like they tell the exact same story in three different genres, for three different companies, and it's the same story of a guy who thinks he wants to do a heroic or cool or new or wonderful thing, and rushes into a situation and says, I'm going to be the fucking hero of this situation, and then realizes it's much more complicated than he thought and slowly falls apart within that situation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I didn't do that on purpose. I was like, whoa, I'm writing the same story 3 times. And that's when you're like, oh shit, I'm just writing my own story. Like,
yeah, well, that was kind of the
right?
question, yeah.
Yeah,
but,
so like, that's just me in the CIA. It's just
Yeah.
fucking, my psychology is so thin. And so I see those books as much more linked than Vision. Mr. Miracle and Batman to me feel like they're linked, and Heroes, because that's all about like anxiety and panic and this idea that the world, that you're sort of trapped in this world and you can't get out, right? Like that's what all three of those things are about, and learning to live in that sort of situation. Like that the anxiety doesn't go away, but you still have to live with it.
Mm-hmm.
Like dark side is, but you still have to live. And so I see those three as being connected in that way, and successful on various levels in addressing that. And so hopefully I'll come up with a new theme by then. And that's all about me having a panic attack and me having all sorts of psychological issues over the last 3 years.
So that was part of my question is how much of the content of these comics is driven by you having to deal with bullshit from the CIA versus something that's outside of that, or is that, I don't know if that's a valid question or not.
When you write, like when I first started writing, the first thing you do as a writer is you write these sort of memoirish kind of things, and some people get so good at them and they write little Romana clefs and stuff. To me, I was fucking terrible at it. I would write these, sort of, and it was me writing as myself, but with a disguised character, so his name was Tom with an H or some shit. Who could this possibly be? And it's incredibly boring because you're like, my thoughts, I mean, maybe they're interesting to you, but they're incredibly boring to me because I'm with them 24 hours a day. It's the same fucking reruns in my head all the time. It's just watching the same show. So like when I put it on paper, I was like, oh man, that's a really boring character. Why do I want to spend 6 months in this guy's head? And then you move to another level, or as for me, it was like I was able to write when I was like, okay, I'm going to write some other character. I'm going to write, like in Sheriff, we have Sophia and Nasser and Chris. None of those people are like me in any way. And the easier, Sophia and Nasser are a lot easier to write than Chris, because Chris is closer to me. And so then you're like, oh, I get this. I'm in someone else's head and I'm doing great. But then you realize at the end of the day, you're like, oh shit, I was in my head the whole time. You thought you were running away from yourself, but you actually just run back to that memoir. You're just kind of disguising it in a different way. Because I mean, at the end of the day, you're the one. Everything you create is you.
Yeah.
There's no. no matter your greatest imagination, your greatest empathy, you never get outside of your own head.
Yeah. Well, so this is why I want to circle back to this. I mean, it's a dark book. It's
got to almost have my first happy ending.
It does have a happy ending, I agree, but it's also really...
Visions, much, woo.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
And Sheriff, woo.
Yeah.
Omega Man. And then that Batman 100, woo.
Oh, boy.
Have you written Batman 100 in your head?
In
your head?
Well, as of last week, I went to LA and I got the last 30 issues approved, so we know what the last...
Oh, so very nice.
Yeah, it's all
very
done.
nice.
Batman, I just have to execute it now.
Yeah, not a chance.
Yeah, we'll see.
Very good. This is a really good book, and I don't know. It really touched me, and it really affected me in a way. And I want to thank you both for making this comic. I sincerely feel that, and I think everyone here in this room does as well. Yeah. So, do you guys have another project you're working on together that we can talk about?
Not that we can talk about.
Not that you can talk about.
Well, we're doing Heroes in Crisis.
Heroes in Crisis number 8.
Okay.
And, but yeah, we're building the next. I don't know. Maybe called like the trilogy Sheriff. We're building another 12-issue maxi series.
Okay.
Yeah.
That will hopefully break out of that theme of anxiety and.
Okay.
Yeah, it's about the next theme.
Yeah. I mean, I want to see more. I think everybody in this room wants to see more from you guys as a team. I think you guys are one of our modern master teams. I really think the two of you work together so well that it's pretty fucking amazing.
Yeah.
You know? And yeah, so the more you guys do, we want it. That's awesome. What we want. So
I want to
remember this when Mark Miller sent you that fucking email. And he's like, "You want some of that Netflix money?"
Yeah.
Oh man, Comic Experience told me I was special.
And you are, so it all works out. Yeah. I want to thank you guys, not just for this work. I want to thank you for coming out here and talking to us, but thank you for this. This book is a gift to me. I don't know. I've been selling comics for 30 years almost, and this is a very special book. And you guys should be very, 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 very proud of it. That's what I think. Yeah. So, and if you at home have not got a copy of Mr. Miracle, well, you're fucking idiots. But go out and buy a copy, and you should do that. Our next month's book is By Night by John Allison and Christine Larson. John Allison is in the UK, so we can't fly him out here because I can't afford that. But Christine is going to be here in person. It's going to be a Sunday morning at 10 a.m. because John Allison's in the UK, and so that's like 6 in the afternoon for him. So that's April 21st at 10 a.m. The month after that, in May, we've got a book called Cannonball by a new artist by the name of Kelsey Rotten, which is really good. Boy, are you guys going to like that. So, comics, right? Like, comics are amazing. And I love comics. Thank you guys for making comics. And thank you guys for making comics. And the last thing I have to do is I have to thank our sponsors at Comics Beat, www.comicsbeat.com, the single best website for comics news and commentary. They make this possible. You make this possible, all of you. If you're watching this at some future point in time and you think, how can I support comics and making comics and good comic shops? www.graphicnovelclub.com/start, and then you can be a part of this too. And thank you guys so much for coming out. I really appreciate it. Tom, Mitch, You guys are masters. So fuck yeah, comics. And we're out.